Pearl is written and directed by Ty West and stars Mia Goth. So Pearl is the, I guess, sequel to the film X that came out earlier this year. So when it comes to X was a film that I actually enjoyed quite a bit. I wasn't in love with the film, but I enjoyed it for what it was. There were a lot of different things about it that I appreciated from just not only a filmmaking standpoint, but also just the way it was able to embrace the kind of cliche elements of slasher, but at the same time providing something that I felt was a little different to the genre. When it comes to Pearl, I gotta say, just my thoughts right out of the gate for this movie. I enjoyed it about somewhat of the same level that I did X. And earlier I said I guess this is a prequel to the film X, because officially it's supposed to be establishing an origin story for Mia Goth's character Maxine in X. But for at least half of this film's runtime, I was really confused on how the timelines between Pearl and X really made any sense, because Pearl takes place in 1918 and X takes place in 1979, and Mia Goth's character is essentially more or less the same age. So for a long time watching Pearl, I was in a state of confusion on how this all really connected and made sense. But after a certain point, I kind of just in my head just came to my own understanding that this is perhaps like some sort of alternate universe. This is Ty West exploring similar concepts that he did with X, except focusing on a singular character, and also exploring the same setting because it takes place what seems to me to be the same exact ranch and house that was the setting in X. And once I kind of just put my mind into that understanding, it was a little easier to just kind of accept what this film was doing. But even though I did enjoy this film for what it was, I gotta say, it did kind of take a while for me to really click with the film. It took, I would say, the first act of this movie, I really wasn't that interested or impressed with it. But I think this is a film that gets better as it progresses, because I feel that the first act is the weakest, the second act is the second best aspect of the movie, and the third act, the finale of it, I think is by far the strongest aspect of the film. And I think that's just because it just gets, the story and the characters get a little more interesting. And Mia Goth is able to shine more with her performance as the film progresses. And I gotta say, I think Mia Goth's performance is what really carries this film more than anything. I'm not really saying that to diminish Ty West's creative directing style or anything, because I think Ty West's kind of quirky style of directing does kind of elevate this film into something that is a little bit more fun, a little bit more creative and interesting. But to me, Mia Goth's performance, this film really relies on Mia Goth's performance to make it really engaging and entertaining and fun. Because as I said, somewhere in the second act, she really has to give it her all. And this film actually requires a lot from her. Not only are there scenes where she is, has these really hysterical moments where she's screaming at the top of her lungs in pure anguish and anger. And she embodies that emotion incredibly well in this film. Anybody who has, can relate to feeling this level of anger that she does in this film, will know that that's kind of a terrifying place to be in, and it's pretty terrifying to see it on screen. But also in the third act of this film, it contains some really long takes where she has to spew out an incredibly lengthy monologue. There's a monologue scene in pretty much the finale of this film that goes on for a very long time, and arguably it goes on for a little too long, even though it's very impressive from an acting standpoint, because she goes through kind of a roller coaster of emotions in that monologue. And she's very convincing with the emotions that she does have to convey in that performance. But the monologue does kind of hit a point where you're kind of just like, all right, I kind of get it. It does hit a halfway point in the monologue where I'm like, it doesn't really need to be this long, but then it progresses more, into certain territories. And it started to grow on me a little bit more. But overall, I do feel like it does hit a point where you kind of just zone out a little bit, no matter how hard you try not to. Much like the film X, I feel like this film is also trying to be two things. It's trying to be a substantive kind of slasher film that focuses on character themes, but at the same time, it also wants to be that kind of fun, gory and silly kind of horror film. And it definitely tries its hand at both things and does its best to combine both of them in one film. But I feel like it kind of does just enough on both elements to make it work. Personally, I feel like it could have leaned more on both. I feel like it could have been a bit more substantive with its character themes and its story, but also could have leaned more on the more violent and gory aspect of horror. Because don't get me wrong, we do get both of those things, as I mentioned, especially like in the third act. We do get some just flat out fun to watch gore, but I still do feel like if it offered more on both ends of the spectrum, we would have got something that would have been a little bit more satisfying, a little bit more engaging. Because this film does try to tackle themes about, sexual repression, parental confinement, and what parental confinement can do to one's repressions. And, it's also about liberation and, one's obsession for fame. And, it tries to revolve all these themes around a character that, through all of her constraints and, all of the obstacles that she has in life, kind of has this insane descent into madness. And even though it's entertaining to see her, ever so slowly just unravel into something that is incredibly insane and chaotic, it's still, I feel like, substantive-wise, it could have offered more. But another thing that I really appreciated from this film is its aesthetic look, because not only do I feel like the cinematography and the direction of the camera work throughout this film not only just looks gorgeous, but you can tell has some delicacy to it. Like, there's a lot of effort and personality behind the camera that brought certain scenes to life. But I also just loved the color palette of this film. Like, I loved the vibrancy of it all, because even though the vibrancy makes it feel, again, kind of amplifies that sense of silliness and cartoonish approach to horror. At the same time, I feel like a lot of the color choices, especially in terms of costume design that we get in the third act of the film, have some sort of resonance with the character and the themes that it's trying to embody. And, also the vibrancy is just really eye-popping. Like, it's really fun to look at. This is just a pretty looking film all throughout. And again, overall, I really did enjoy my experience watching this film. One of the biggest compliments I can give it is that for the vast majority of the runtime, I was really never bored. I was still really interested to see how everything unfolded. And, again, one thing that I'm just, maybe y'all in the comment section can really help me out with this. Maybe I'm dumb and I missed something, but the timeline just doesn't really seem to make sense in connection to X. Unless Mia Goth is a vampire or something that's transcending the limits of time, then, I'm not sure. But maybe we'll find out in the third installment, Max XX scene that we're going to get. Maybe just some sort of revelation about it. I'm not sure. But for those who have seen it or know anything about it, let me know in the comment section what you know or feel about this kind of timeline decision. So overall, I'm going to give Pearl a solid 6 out of 10. Also, don't forget that the deadline from our horror film festival is on October 1st. So if you're interested in submitting any of your horror film material, please click on the link down below and submit it there. Also, if you have any friends or family that would be highly interested in submitting their horror shorts, also share it with them. You can only access it through the link that's down in the description box below. But anyways, that's all I got to say about Pearl. If you really enjoyed what I had to say about the film, just give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.